Is the Oriolus BA300s worth the $5,000 price tag? There are a handful of people who simply want answers now. They want the quick answer. They love 3 to 5 minute summaries. So I will answer the question, is the BA300s worth a $5,000 price tag? Yes, absolutely. And no, you are out of your mind. There you go. Now you have your answer. Unfortunately, you'll have to watch the rest of this video to understand it. Hey, I said I'd give you the answer within 5 minutes. I never said you'd understand it within 5 minutes. Let's talk about the manufacturer's claims. If you are a regular viewer, you know that I like to start by looking at the manufacturer's claims. We need to know what the manufacturer says so that we can test to verify if it is true. Oriolus is a Japanese audio company. If you go to their website, you will notice that they have 3 different versions of the 300S. The first is the original 300S, the second is the 300S G2, and the third is the 300S G4. But what happened to the G3? I don't know. The original version and the G4 are sold out on the website, and they have been sold out for several months. What's the difference between these 3? Well, not much. The G2 comes with a 4.4mm balanced to 3.5mm and a 2.5mm cable. Keep in mind, this is not 2 separate cables. So it's not 4.4 to 3.5 and a separate 4.4 to 2.5. No, this is a single cable that has a 4.4mm termination on one end, and on the other end has both the 3.5mm and the 2.5mm terminations. The G4 does essentially the same thing, except instead of a 3.5 and a 2.5, it has a 3.5 and a 4.4. Basically, what Oriolus did is add cable options and name the product G2 and G4, which, for purposes of marketing and clarity, was incredibly stupid. When you say G2 or G4, that suggests Generation 2 or Generation 4, meaning the product has been revised in some way from the previous version. But as far as I can tell, there were no revisions. Only the cable was added depending on which version you buy. All 3 versions, by the way, cost $469 without tax and shipping. Now, about those claims, I have to be honest, I was truly surprised to see the claims. Or frankly, no claims whatsoever, just factual assertions. Oriolus says that the 300S has dual 6N16B tubes inside, no volume control, about 7 hours of battery life, micro USB for charging, and a 4.4mm cable, and that's it. What a breath of fresh air. Finally, a manufacturer that doesn't waste your time with bullshit and candy-filled pseudo-poetry. Here's the thing though, when I complain about manufacturers being unclear about their products, I didn't mean that they should totally disregard telling people what the hell the product actually does. On one hand, you have companies like AudioQuest and Beyerdynamic who provide little meaningful information but lots and lots of paragraphs of word salad. And then you have Oriolus, which gives you practical information about some of the components and nothing else. There is a happy medium here, guys. You could look at this lack of information from Oriolus in, frankly, 2 ways. First, you could say that Oriolus is doing the correct thing by not misleading people. If it does not make claims about its product, then it is not promising any particular results, and therefore it is to be commended. Second, you could say that Oriolus is making a weak case for its product if it does not provide some explanation about what the product actually does. Frankly, I'm not sure what to think at this point. What I can say is that there are no claims about this product, simply not on the manufacturer's website and not from resellers. For example, on Music Tech's website, they say that the 300S gives you a, quote, new and different experience when listening to your music. Okay, well, yes, I don't know what to do with that information. It's kind of like a claim, but it's so weak that I can't even force myself to think of it as a claim. Then there's Pin Audio. They simply restate the factual information from Oriolus' website. There are no claims about the 300's sonic abilities. Funny enough, the first glimpse of claims actually come from Amazon. Oriolus is the stated seller there. And in the description section, they say that the 300S is intended to be easier to hear and add warmth, and that the 300S will make you feel, quote, comfortable and warm. Apparently, a lot like a bonfire. Honestly, I can't hold any of this against Oriolus. It is evident that they use some sort of translation program. Their English syntax and word usage is not that of a native English speaker. Consequently, I applaud them for making somewhat of an effort. It would be very easy to start using flowery language when you don't know what to say, but Oriolus stays away from that. Unlike John Darko, who is British and speaks fluent English and cannot string two sentences together without using pointless flowery language. He is awful. So, are there any claims? Yes, from so-called reviewers. What so-called reviewers claim? There are several written reviews of the 300S and at least 2 or 3 video reviews, other than mine, obviously. I have taken the liberty of collating the ones that I think are representative of the whole group. The first is from headphonics.com. They said, "This is a smooth-sounding, rich presentation with a soft-ish euphonic timbre that is super easy on the ear." Headphonics claims that the 300S retains details, just not the same level as the details present when the tubes are not used. However, later in the review, Headphonics says that the tonality is smoothed out when using the 300S, while at the same time increasing the dynamic range. These are contradictory statements. The second is from Audiofool Reviews. They say that the 300S adds warmth without taking away details and sounded very analog and natural. They said that the 300S either adds a little bit of warmth or it simply does not pair well with the device. In other words, the 300S can be device dependent. It may not sound good with every DAP. The third is from Audio Bucko. They say simply that once they had heard the 300S, they could not unhear it, and things seemed a little less good without it. Wow, what a wonderful explanation. Audio Bucko also claims, quote, "The bass sounds a bit more dynamic, a bit more impactful, and sub-bass has a bit more extension. The mids are a little bit more forward, a little bit thicker, warmer, and there's a tiny boost to the treble that makes it all sound a bit of everything compared to without the amp." End quote. I'll just say this right now and not wait. Audio Bucko's review is unimpressive. Their findings after the short time with the 300S are contrary to some of the things that I found. The treble is not pushed forward, and the mids do not sound more present. Indeed, the test revealed that the 300S elevated the bass, rounded off the treble, and often muddied the details, particularly in the mids. I suppose if Audio Bucko had conducted an actual test, they would have reached a similar conclusion, but hey, one can never tell. And then finally, number 4. Bad Guy Good Audio Reviews. He says that the 300S is an upgrade to an already very expensive DAP like the Lotu Gold Paw Touch, a $2,800 player. He claims that the 300S adds a touch of warmth without losing detail and not sacrificing any quality. He is very enthusiastic about the 4.4mm connections. Let's be clear about one fundamental and unmistakably common factor amongst all of these so-called reviews. None of them have any specificity, and all of them use flowery language. Moreover, it is evident from their comments that none conducted a thorough, lengthy sound test. Out of the sample of reviews I spoke of, the only one that seemed to fall head over heels for the 300S is Bad Guy Good Audio, but we will get to him later. The problem with other reviews is that they simply do not accurately describe the sound change in the Oriolus. Some claim that the Oriolus provides a boost in everything, bass, mids, and treble. That is not true. Some say that the sound is detailed with the 300S. That also is not true. Some say that the 300S adds musicality. That is a vague term which adds absolutely nothing to the conversation. Indeed, it appears that none of the reviewers really know how to describe the sound character of the 300S. It's like the secret sauce on your meatloaf. It may have some type of flavor you can't explain and it might taste good, but I doubt it is all natural. In other words, the reviewers for the most part say that the 300S adds stuff without explaining in detail what that stuff is, and then they recommend the product. Typical reviewer bullshit. Then there is Bad Guy Good Audio Reviews. He has a large following. The problem with him is that he is just as ambiguous as the others, and probably in some respects more so. He uploaded his video about the 300S in February 2019. It is roughly 10 minutes long. He paired the 300S with a $2,800 DAP that the vast majority of people cannot afford, and sane people would outright reject. He then says that in order to up your game, you need to pair the $2,800 DAP to the 300S, and you don't lose detail and you retain the sound quality. I cannot say that this bad guy is out to mislead people. All I can say is that his conduct certainly points and paints a grim picture. Here's the message you get with his video. The Low 2 is an incredible player, it costs as much as a house payment. The 300S elevates this already amazing Low 2 player. There are no downsides to the 300S, it adds a little bit of warmth and retains all the detail and sonic qualities. Let us assume that you, as a sane person, do not have the Low 2 since you would prefer to make your monthly rent, car, insurance, food, and gas bills. But you just heard from Bad Guy that the 300S has no downsides. It makes even amazing DAP sound more amazinger. You are then enticed to go out and buy the 300S. Why? Because it makes even the most expensive DAP sound better, has no faults, and would clearly make your pitiable $500 FIO M11 sound that much better. Oh, and by the way, our bad guy has not uploaded an actual review of the 300S since February. So for the last 9 months, he has provided no further information. To say that I have a low opinion of our little bad guy's review would be putting it lightly. Let's talk about the real tests. Okay, let's just get to the meat of this. The so-called reviewers we just spoke of are a joke. Either they simply do not test or they test with minimal effort and they always recommend the product. I take a rather different position. I strongly suggest you watch the comparison videos to get a full understanding. However, I will briefly explain my test results here. Overall, I think the 300S does in fact change the sound. Slightly. The bass response is elevated. Slightly. It becomes looser with the 300S, meaning there is a longer resonance, a lingering of the bass notes, and then it bleeds into the mids. The mids are not elevated throughout all my testing. Indeed, I would say that the mids remain pretty much about the same as they would on the player without the tube amplifier. The only difference is that the looser bass response tends to meld with the mid frequencies. In doing so, the mids become harder to separate in a mix and often get overwhelmed by a bass instrument. The treble is very slightly rounded. The sharp treble spikes that might be present in a song will get just a little bit blunted. In other words, the 300S rolls off the treble by a few decibels. This is not a huge difference, but noticeable when conducting an A-B test. Anyone who says that the treble is elevated is out of their mind. The 300S does in fact add distortion to the music. The loose bass is emphasized over the mids. Separation in the mids is mostly lost. Indeed, during our tests, we discovered that the separation of multiple vocalists is less clear and sometimes very difficult to find. That separation is clearly present when the 300S is not attached. The 300S absolutely loses detail. There is no way to get around it. The tubes by nature add pop and sizzle and distortion to the music. There is a hum in the background that, although not audible once music is playing, is certainly present throughout the music. It's just that the hum is now somewhere in the background, lost within the song. When we listened to New Light by Kazuki, we discovered that the 300S could not present the crunching sound of the footsteps on dry grass, a detail that is audible when the 300S is not connected. We also found that the string instruments were harder to separate in the mix, and they melded together, muddying their individual instrument characteristics. It became harder to distinguish which was the guitar, the violin, and some other string instrument. If you listened hard enough, you could usually hear the differences, but it was not the same as when I was listening to the player alone. Indeed, all of this leads me to conclude that the 300S does not retain detail or the sound qualities. This is contrary to what some of these so-called reviewers claim, including our little bad guy, who somehow overlooked providing a detailed explanation for his conclusion. Let's talk about the sound. I've said this before, the 300S does in fact add something. It's not a night and day difference. It's not as if you would suddenly realize musical nirvana if you used the 300S. That's what some people would have you believe, but it's not a categorical truth. Sound is very subjective. A minor tweak here or there might make a song sublime for one person, and the same tweaks could be very unflattering for someone else. It's not one size fits all. Consequently, when people claim that the 300S adds musicality and makes the songs more betterer because, well, it just does, they are speaking of their personal taste. My approach is different. I do not add that I like or dislike the sonic signature. I try to describe it the best way I can and then emphasize that people will have to judge themselves if they like the sound. But for so-called reviewers to say that the 300S adds musicality and pleasantness, they make a blanket statement which is absolutely untrue. It is a lie because people will dislike the sound whereas others will like the sound. I would urge people to be honest with themselves about what type of sound signature they prefer. Sometimes it is hard to tell. Not everyone knows. Some people's preferences change over time. Thus, when reviewers say the 300S is amazing, they give you the impression that you must buy it. The reason you do not need to buy the 300S. I can give you one good reason to buy the 300S. If you have lots of money to spend and want the absolute best without money being of any concern. If you have a $2,800 DAP, then you may be the type of person who goes out and buys an amplifier like the 300S. In your mind, the tiny improvements or changes the 300S makes will be plenty to justify its cost. But for everyone else who lives on planet Earth and not on planet Dum Dum, there are plenty of reasons why the 300S is not worthy of your money. First, the sonic changes to the music are slight in comparison. We already spoke of this, but it needs emphasizing. Anyone who thinks that the 300S is going to provide tremendously different sound is being misled. Second, the amplification on the 300S is laughably small. Remember, this is a tube amplifier, meaning it is supposed to provide more volume. It barely succeeds. Some reviewers have commented that the 300S provides at most 3 decibel gain. I would say it's a little bit more than that, but I can't be sure. Take a moment to consider this. You spend $500 for an amplifier that amplifies approximately 3 decibels. There are actual portable amplifiers that do a much better job at half the price. Third, the tubes are soldered on. Now, this is common for portable tube amplifiers, the very few that exist. Once the tubes die, your musical nirvana dies with it. You could theoretically unsolder the tubes and solder new ones on. That is possible if you can find the correct tubes and if you are confident in your soldering abilities. Audiophiles are not soldering geniuses. Only a fraction of them actually know how to solder, and only a portion of that fraction can solder well. Fourth, the balanced 4.4mm in and out is frankly stupid. It is a gimmick with no real difference. Some people claim that the 4.4mm provides clean signal to the 300S and you get the best sound quality. This is a spurious claim when you're dealing with tube amplifiers. Why? Because the tube amp is going to distort and add noise. It will take that pristine signal and screw it up. That's the job. Moreover, if you do not have a player with 4.4mm output, then you would need to buy a $60 cable alternative for either 2.5 or 3.5mm. Whatever minimal sonic differences there might be between balanced and unbalanced become trivial when tubes are concerned. Fifth, the cost of the 300S is arguably too high. The 300S is sold for approximately $470, though you can find it a little bit cheaper sometimes. Then you have to factor the cables in the event you do not have a player with a 4.4mm out. That's an additional $60 per cable. Then you factor in tax and shipping. At minimum, you're talking about $500. A $500 for a portable tube amplifier that increases volume by approximately 3 decibels and provides slight sonic changes. Finally, there are significantly cheaper alternatives that arguably do the job equally as well as the 300S. Let's talk about the alternative. I compared the 300S to the Little Bear B4X. The B4X is supposed to be a balanced tube amplifier, but it is not. It has single-ended 3.5mm in and out. The 300S, in comparison, is a true balanced amplifier. The B4X has more hiss and hum in the signal than the 300S, but just as with the 300S, once the music plays, the hiss and hum disappears into the song. Stop playing the music, and it is audible again. Neither amplifier is noise-free. Sonically, however, the B4X seems to have a cleaner presentation than the $500 balanced 300S. I was surprised to find this, but the repeated tests seem to confirm this conclusion. The 300S has a slightly more pronounced bass than the B4X. At first thought, this would mean that the 300S is a, quote, better amplifier, adding more bass boom. But that's not true. You see, the 300S does not add boom, but rather looseness. The additional looser bass bleeds into the mids and makes it difficult to hear the separation of vocalists. The B4X has a slightly less pronounced bass emphasis in comparison, and it has slightly better separation of the mids. When comparing the treble response, I found that the 300S rounds off the treble more so than the B4X, just ever so slightly. The B4X retains some of the energy in the treble. As for detail retrieval, well, this was easy. The B4X simply had slightly more detail than the 300S. I could hear more footsteps in New Light by Kazuki, I could hear the separation of multiple vocalists slightly more clearly on the B4X, and I could hear the mids overall more clearly because the bass on the B4X is slightly less emphasized and a bit tighter. The volume increase on the B4X is noticeably more. Throughout my test with the Sony NW-WM1A, I found that the B4X's max volume was approximately 10 steps higher than the 300S. Now, this is not 10 decibels higher, but 10 volume step increases on the player itself. All of this, and the B4X, is only $100. For 1/5 the price, you get nearly the same sonic presentation. Some might like what I have described about the B4X, whereas others may dislike it. That is a personal preference. But the point is that when you pay $400 more for the 300S, you should expect exponentially different sound. But you don't get that. As I said before, there are some people who justify the 5 times cost of the 300S, but I cannot. The B4X has its own flaws. I'm not impressed with its build quality. It has a metallic ringing noise whenever I put it down on the table. I mean, the 300S does as well, but not as much. And it is simply much too large for what is inside. But these are forgivable flaws for a device that costs $100. Should you buy the 300S? Well, yes. Buy it if you want. Buy it if you heard all of this information and believe it is a worthwhile purchase. But for everyone else who simply wants to get a tube-like sound signature on the go without wasting money, I suggest you not buy the 300S. The B4X has a sonic presentation that is so close to the 300S that it would be foolhardy to reject the B4X outright. Yes, there is the cool factor of the 300S. It's made in Japan, has high quality components, is balanced, and some reviewers speak very highly of it. But that is grade school logic. In grade school, you wanted Air Jordans not because you believed they would provide the support and balance you need for the swing set on the playground. No, you wanted it because it was Michael fucking Jordan and the cool kids had them. You're too old for that nonsense. Let the cool kids sit in their cesspool of stupidity. Let them buy their $2,800 DAPs and the 300S and $1,200 IEMs. Let them have their fun. But you don't need to be part of that dumb club. The Oriolus BA300s is an interesting concept that simply is hard to justify. You can do equally as good with 1/5 the price. If you found this video or any of my other videos helpful, then please consider joining my Patreon. I currently have 11 very giving, wonderful, generous patrons who give me a little bit of their hard-earned money once a month. If you could find a way to give me just $2 a month, that would be very helpful, because it would help me save up money to buy products that I can thoroughly and honestly review for you. If you are a regular viewer but have not subscribed, please consider subscribing. We are well on our way to almost 700 subscribers. I'd love to reach that 700 goal before the end of the year. If you want me to review a product I currently own, please click on the product review form link in the description below. Please complete that and I will get to your request as soon as I can. I hope all of you have a wonderful day, and we will talk again soon. Take care.